I had a question. So we're between Series A, Series B, about 3 million annualized revenue.
If I can provide some advice, even in June of 2023, every founder I meet is too optimistic about funding today. You're not between rounds. You are unfundable until someone tells you otherwise. Everyone was between rounds in 20 and 21. We're pre-Series B, we're pre-A, we're doing our third pre-A round. There is no between A and B or seed and A or B and C. You are unfundable for now.
I'll restate my question. We're an unfundable company. That's right. And we generate both recurring software revenue and also non-recurring professional services. We have a pretty complex product.
What's the ratio?
It's about 50-50 right now. Blended margin's about 70%. We see a future where we can pull out more of the professional services, either automating into the platform or with partner programs. How long do we intentionally stay close to customers and embrace the professional services versus start to build those kind of programs?
It's a great question. The question is, if you have one of these businesses where services really enable the product to work, right? These aren't just to help folks start or to deal with the fact you didn't build a few features you should have built out of that your onboarding is bad. Where that domain knowledge really helps people use the software, right? You need both together. Yeah, it's very common that big customers want a solution, and software alone is often not the solution. They want experts along with the solution. We gotta be a software company. That means at least 70% of our revenue has to come from software, not services, ideally 80. This was like 80-20. Palantir is most interesting. Palantir was like 18% software until the year before their IPO, and they flipped to like 70 in 1 year. Okay, now some of that I bet is financial shenanigans because it's too fast. But Palantir was basically a services company that magically before its IPO became a software company. Right. No one on planet Earth wants to fund a professional services company. You are unfundable, but it doesn't mean you'll be unfundable for everybody. But be careful, because you can throw out the solution with the software. I've seen this happen too many times, is founders get all this advice that you have to be all software. They dump the services business. When it's a solution business, it gets much harder to close the customers. Because when you make the solution worse, you lose some of your magic. I would be careful advice to dehumanize the support until the software really can replace these very specialized folks with medical knowledge and others.
Some of the other advice I've gotten is don't really think too much about it until you're at 10 million plus ARR and you really understand the solution. I like that too.
My question is this. Traditional sales-led model, not a product-led model, grew 3x last year, raised a Series B, so we were fundable, growth stalled out.
What? Growth
stalled out.
Well, as you saw in the charts today, you're not the only one.
Built up a sales org, including the VP of sales. Now I've got to go back in and rebuild. How have you approached this in the past? And is it usually the founders just got to go back in and run sales?
How big is or was the sales team?
It's about 12 if you include the technical support.
Okay, and the VP of sales left?
Still there. And
wants to stay through this tougher period, committed?
Yes.
And how many of the 12 are sort of kind of hitting quota now? 3. What does your VP of sales want to do?
Iterate and try to make things better.
You have confidence in her or him?
I think the challenge is that the things we did that worked, 18 months ago don't work anymore.
Right? That's true of half the room, right? Yeah. Do you have a person that is agile enough to evolve the playbook or not?
I think the problem we've got is that we've now had a number of quarters to evolve it and it hasn't, and I've been off doing other things. Now I'm come back to it and I've realized we've got to iterate it faster.
What to do with a good but not great VP of sales, and I'm not saying that's your person, but the math holds. And I did some math of what happens in a typical model if you have a bad VP. You usually see performance decline from founder-led sales. It's all the time. A founder will have a certain level of quirky efficiency with 2 AEs. They'll bring in the wrong VP of sales, and efficiency goes down. A great VP of sales is in 1 quarter you're selling more. Whether you're selling 10% more or 100% more, that's a sign of a great, that in 1 quarter or less or 1 sales cycle, it's materially better. Then there's this middle area where things are still growing. And what you usually find is if you get rid of the good but not great VP of sales and don't have a plan, don't have someone to replace her or him, don't have a strategy, I see companies go into a spiral they often struggle to recover from. And you got to be really careful and understand. You got to do it quantitatively, but you have to add like a toughness factor to it. And I see too many emotional, passionate CEOs go off and fire that head of sales, and then for a year there's no one. Another sign of a bad VP of sales is it gets immediately better when they leave because the rest of the team steps up. It happens all the time for a bad VP of sales, but you have to decide if bad or okay, and I'd be very cautious about making the replacement if they're okay in this environment. The answer is always be 90% transparent and do what the business needs to be done and be open about it. And sometimes they will quit, but it's okay. Like, it sucks, but it's okay. You don't hide the ball. Don't try to do a stealth search unless you magically find someone. 100% transparency is too much, I think, but 90% is pretty good.
How do you respond to cold emails and what it takes to write a great cold email in 2023?
I have an article titled, 2 Cold Emails I Funded for Millions. I have David Sachs, Keith Raboy, Eileen Lee, Satya Patel from Homebrew, who did Chime and Plaid, and me, all sharing examples of how they respond to cold emails. They're pretty darn good investors. Amazing, great emails that are perfect, that solve your problem as a buyer for real right now, or as an investor, that are jaw-dropping investments, get opened. The weird thing about CEOs, even of huge companies, is almost all of them open all their emails. They sit in front of their phones and their computers. And look, they don't open the dumb emails and they don't go to the promotions tab. If you're a CEO and someone sends you an email with a headline that's gonna solve your problem, like, imagine your problem is, I need a VP of sales. I mean, it's not your problem, right? Or maybe you need a director of outbound, okay? And you get an email and it's from me. And I'm like, I've got the best director of outbound candidate for you. You're gonna open that in 4 seconds, right? And that's why amazing outbound works for sales, it works for marketing, it works for raising fund. The mistake mediocre salespeople make is they think a cadence is gonna work, or they think a form email where they replace, if they can pick my brain or buy me coffee. You can't buy a CEO coffee. The stupid emails don't work, but the one you spend 2 hours on researching and you solve their problem, it always works. It always gets opened. I closed a $6 million customer from a raw email. Here's exactly what we do for your peer companies, for your competitors. Can I do it for you? Sent to the right person, the right buyer at the right time. If you don't invest the time on outbound, I really don't think it works in 2023.
There's a lot of buzz right now around salespeople building personal brands. It's not really a selling activity. It's not really moving a needle forward like right now. But on LinkedIn, it's everywhere. What's your take on that?
I think sales folks should spend at least half their time building their own brand rather than selling their product. I think they should spend 60, 70% just on LinkedIn, promoting themselves, not selling. But I think it's great if you've had at least 2 weeks of experience of an SDR, is if you share your learnings with the world for hours a day. I've been an SDR for 4 weeks now. Let me tell you how to do outbound. And after that, buy my course. I don't think any of us expected that LinkedIn feed would get as big and as visceral as it is. Right now, the engagement for SaaS Europa is higher on LinkedIn than Twitter. That certainly wasn't true 4 or 5 years ago. It's crazy. The best stuff, the best summaries of this event, the best photos, the best long-form content. You can research someone on LinkedIn and see if they say very intelligent things about not just themselves, but maybe their product. A handful of folks do this very effectively on LinkedIn, but 80% of folks take it too far. They spend too much time, they give cut and paste advice, and they judge themselves on the number of followers or views they have on LinkedIn. Quality over quantity and moderation. Seeing a couple great posts from someone on how to do sales in your industry, really interesting. Seeing 8 a day, maybe I wouldn't make that higher.
I would be super curious to hear a story of yours about a time you had to make a really difficult business decision, perhaps related to integrity. What happened? What did you do? At what point in your career was this? And would you have handled it the same way today?
Being objective, I think I'm one of the highest integrity people out there. And the more time that goes by, the more benefits I get from it, and the more hurt I get by it. Because the more people will throw you under the bus, the more people will wrong you. Right before I got here, someone took millions of dollars away from me that I earned for them. This is people I helped for years, and they did it because they could. They did it out of just sheer greed or whatever. I had a very good friend. I had an early boss earlier in my career who I came in, I was hired to do a specific role. I was in business development. I had a $30K bonus on a 150 base for a VP of business development. I went into a company, and I had a specific business development goal to hit. It turned out to be technically impossible. The company lost all of its revenue. It was going to go out of business. CO was going to give up. I went out, I pitched 200 VCs and raised him $40 million. All he had to do was show up to the meetings. No, everyone else in the company had given up, raised him $40 million. He sat me down after in the conference room and said, "You saved the company. Here's your bonus." Because he gave me 10 out of the 30. I said, "Tim, I get that I did not hit my initial KPI, but I got you the 40 million. You were about to go bankrupt." It's like, "Yeah, but you didn't hit your goal." I thanked him. I said, "Keep your check. I'm here. I'm on your team." I didn't quit or create any drama. I just gave him the 10K back.
Wow.
So about 2 weeks later, he sheepishly gave me the 30 grand.
Wow. Jason
Jason was great, but I'm glad he gave me the 40 million, but he didn't hit his other goal. He didn't earn it. And I see no karma out there at all. But real people do startups because they think that the pie grows. The pie can only be 100%. But if we all grow the pie, we can do something where we don't have to steal from each other. You can be successful as an AE without taking away revenue from your colleague, without stealing their lead. There is no karma. It will not be fixed. The person that wronged you will go on to success, but you will probably get other shots and other chances to benefit from this positive sum game that is startups, and why I think the best of us do it, right?
What proportions of people do everything right, as far as anyone might say?
And still fail? I think that all the metrics on startups that 90% fail, I think these are Sony baloney metrics. I think truly great founders that have a great CTO and CTO, or a CTO that can be both, that can build amazing software, that do not quit, that commit for years, not months, but years, and that understand a market. I've seen 0% fail. I've never failed in my entire career from startups. I'm not as good as Edith, as Parker. I'm not even close, but I've never failed. But I've almost failed every time. My first startup, it was tough times. All the VCs pulled their term sheets. There was no way to make payroll. I went out, I closed $6 million of contracts and shipped our product in 2 weeks. $6 million of revenue and shipped our products in 2 weeks. I finally got a term sheet, but only if I would personally pledge $750,000 to back the company. I had $8,000 in the bank, but we did have a house, so I had to pledge the house to the VCs, but I friggin' did it. At Adobe Sign Echo Sign, we screwed up. I had some money for my first 14 months without any salary to stretch it after having a salary, but I didn't quit. My other co-founder walked out the friggin' door and never came back. Said he was taking parental leave, came back 8 months later for 1 day, and then turned around and left. He quit, smarter than me, he quit. If I did what him, I would have failed. Got on planes, and finally found Dell, and finally found GE, and finally found BT and Comcast, and closed them, and it took 2 years longer than it should have, and I had no salary, but I didn't quit, and I recruited pretty good people. Even with our little team at SaaStr, we have 7 people. March 2020 came on. We were the first major event to be canceled by COVID by Santa Clara County. We lost $10 million in one night. A bunch of the team quit. Amelia, who may or may not be here, right there. That night, she didn't go home and fixed everything in 30 days. We couldn't get the $10 million back. We fixed all these issues. She didn't quit. Kyle had to abandon his first product, the CO. His first product before SalesLoft was the product called Prospector that had $7 million in revenue. LinkedIn threatened to sue them, and they had to abandon $7 million in revenue and start from scratch. He didn't quit. He took a product that went from 7 to 0 and built it into a $2.5 billion exit, okay? So you bet on those folks, and they don't lose, do they? It's supposed to be hard. And the best ones almost fail, and Daniel Dines from UiPath, 10 years to $1 million in revenue for UiPath that's at $1 billion. Where do people, in my experience, still fail like this? When the CEO's like pretty good, they're committed, they'll do it for 10 years, they'll run up the hill, they'll hustle, they'll get the sales, but the CTO isn't that good. It's too competitive today. You can't sell a mediocre product. Everyone has competition. If you don't think you have competition for budget. No one is going to go bankrupt if they don't buy your product, absent a few crazy security products. And where I see failing is when a CEO, especially a CEO that hasn't built software before, doesn't know how to build great software, or is not a great recruiter, starts off with an okay technical co-founder. I'm looking for a CTO that's better than the CEO. I'm looking for a CTO that's so amazing. I ask, what features do you want to build? Like, what kind of software do you like to build? What do you like to do on the weekends? And I want to hear someone that's a hacker that wants to triple the output of their software and that has 7 features they're going to launch next week. I don't want to hear someone that's talking about how they wear Prada shoes and like it's really hard to get the release out. Like you got to run from those people, or they don't know, or they're intimidated, or they're scared. Too many business founders fail without a great CEO. You can build a piece of HubSpot. Build HubSpot for restaurants, build HubSpot for taxi cab owners, right? A great team can do it. They turn that 90% failure rate into 0.9, but they almost fail all the time.
So, a bit of context, I'm the head of revenue at a B2B business called Trust Keith, $1 million of ARR, and we do data protection as a service. So we help other tech startups comply with things like GDPR. We're about to embark on this journey from 1 to 3 million, and just wondered if you have any thoughts or advice to share as you go onto that journey, because it's quite different from 0 to 1.
How quickly do you want from 1 to 3?
How quickly? Maybe in the next 2 years. We're bootstrapped, so I would say within the next 2 years, that's probably the time frame that we'd be looking at.
Who else is on the sales team besides you?
It's me and SDR, and the founder probably spends about 60% of his time in the revenue function as well. So we've got a pretty lean team.
Just don't calculate just the amount of human capital it will take to hit these numbers. You need the scaled human beings to hit the plan 3 to 6 months from now, not to hit the plan now. The faster you're growing, the harder the math it is. The slower you're growing, the more you have time to get the people and go. But let's step back from it. You want to go from 1 to 3. We'll come back in 2 years. So you want to add plus 2 million over 2 years. Let's simplify, even though the math's wrong, to 1 million over the course of a year, a little less than 1 million. In the next 6 months, you should hire 1 great person to your team. Yeah. And then if you want to go from 1 to 3, you should obsess about not hiring a salesperson, but 1 great AE will move the needle for you. And then hire another. Like you have the luxury, if that's the growth rate you want to do, you can hire these AEs sequentially, so you'll need 1 more to hit the plan next year, so you need 2. You always sort of need 2 of everything to make it work for redundancy. So you need 2 AEs and 2 SDRs is kind of the nuts and bolts. It might not be the question you're asking, but it's what you need.
No, that's really helpful. Where do you stand on the balance between marketing and sales? Because I feel like every business I speak to is way over-indexed on sales and isn't touching marketing. So where do you stand on that? Like if we get 1 AE and an SDR, do you have thoughts on the marketing side as well?
Well, I think it's a really good question that could go a lot of ways. First of all, I think your observation is a good one, an astute one, which is almost all founders put more energy into sales and marketing for a variety of reasons. They don't know demand gen. Sometimes they don't trust it if they haven't done it. They think it's too soft. So that is an issue. Also, there's another reality that in most startups, sales consumes so much of the oxygen. It's so human-centric. It takes so much time that marketing gets ignored. Even our little SaaStr team, 7 people, when we do our daily scrums, 80% of it's sales for us. Everything we do, all the content in this event costs money, but everything else is free. The weekly webinars are free. The YouTubes are free. SaaS University is free. We generate so much content all the time, but 80% of our conversation is about those little sponsor booths that are out there, right? So, but how do you address it? Well, I think the simple answer is you can't fully, but the key is to help. Do you have like a real head of demand gen marketing today?
We've finally found a freelance marketing director. They've got good strategic know-how, but they're also happy to get stuck in, and it's taken about 1.5 years to find that person. They can do the strategy, but 80-90% of what they're doing is actually getting shit done.
So usually the reality is when you have a CEO that has not lived demand gen or ABM or all these other things, you at least help her or him find a great person if you can, which you have, and then promote it and educate it and build, like Sterling talked about this morning, promote that partnership, come up with joint goals and promote joint wins and try to elevate the level of marketing in the same way attention that sales gets, and it will then get more attention than it deserves. Nice. If they're a contractor or consultant, make sure they're part of at least the pseudo management team.
We do, yeah. Weekly leadership meeting.
Is she or he coming to them? Even if you have to twist the CEO's arm, either you will find out that person is not a leader because they don't come. If the person doesn't have a seat at the table, this is true in so many things. It's true in equality. They can't really influence the decisions, can they?
No.
So that's one quick hack you can do, and watch what happens.